There have been times in my life where I felt completely misaligned, like I was drifting through the motions without direction. And frankly, this happens quite often. I think it happens a lot when we're young and when we're trying to figure out life, figure out the next steps, right? The feeling of misalignment usually shows up when I lack clarity on what the next step, looks like. It creeps in during moments of uncertainty and self-doubt. I've noticed this often when I'm traveling after being exposed to how other people live, how big the world is, and how much possibility there is out there. I think when we're living our life, going to our job, we kind of create this little bit of a bubble that we live in where we think that the way our life is how everyone else's life is, and it kind of just limits our vision a little bit. But in moments like these, I remember something that I learned over the last few years from a client that I work with. He says, you can have anything you want, you can become anything you want, but just because you can do anything doesn't mean you should try to do everything. And when we look at life with so much possibility, it feels like, oh man, we should try to do everything we possibly can. And even though there is a little bit of truth to that, and we should try to do as much as possible, we shouldn't get in our mind the idea that we have to do everything. Once you find those things that really align with you and the things that you want to pursue, you kind of just have to double down on that, because there isn't enough life for us to just master everything, right? And it can become exhausting trying to master everything. This balance is hard, but I've learned to pay attention to the signals, the reoccurring thoughts that I can't shake, the ideas that kind of keep me up at night, and the ideas that are constantly going through my mind, because I think that's where the real path is. That's where I've started to double down. I'll give this example of cybersecurity. I found that job, that industry very interesting, and so I started to take some courses on it and see if this is something that I wanted to do. I've always been interested in tech and coding, and so there's a little bit of both to cybersecurity, so I started taking courses and quickly found out that it just wasn't for me, right? And I paid attention to that signal, quit taking those courses, and decided to just pivot and look at other things. And in the current role that I'm in, doing marketing, I found that I actually love that a lot more, and that gave me a different feeling than what taking cybersecurity courses did for me, right? I started taking marketing courses and absolutely loved it. Was always thinking about new ways to do things, and I took that as a signal, right? But often there's a real fear of becoming this next version of yourself, That fear doesn't mean you're on the wrong path. It just usually means you're exactly where you need to be, right? If something excites you and scares you at the same time, that's not a warning sign. It's more of a signal. It's more of a compass. Because life comes at us in cycles, right? Periods of intense work and periods of forced rest. And we should try to force ourselves to rest if we found that signal and we're just pursuing it. And maybe we hit a wall and we don't know what else to do. Might be time to take a rest and just be conscious of what's going on around you. Mr. Beast, I'm sure you're aware of, he does this as well. He'll have periods of his life where he's just flat out working all the time. And then there's periods where he just does nothing. And it's those periods where it's you rebuild, your mind can start to think about all the results from the things you've been doing. Think about all the successes that you had, losses that you have, and your mind can start to piece these things together. I wrote this in my newsletter. Rest doesn't mean you're falling behind. Rest is part of the process. It gives you clarity. But don't confuse rest with inaction. One restores you and the other drains you. Inaction can look like not making a decision just because we're fearful, right? And that inaction and choosing to not make a decision is in reality making a decision. But I believe only with practice do we really find, that difference. If you're unsure about how to become the person you want to be, start with some disciplines. Write for 30 minutes a day. Go to the gym, start eating better, text that person back, reach out to a friend you haven't spoken to in a long time, clean up your space. Jordan Peterson talks about cleaning up your room, right? And say no more often. So there's little practices that you can do to start building up small disciplines, to start exploring more and start reaching out more and finding those things that you enjoy, right? Those things that give you the signal of, hey, maybe this is what I need to pursue. This is something that I'm working on a lot of, where I'm like, what do I want to be in 5 years? And that vision is not clear right now. I don't know what I need to do in the next 5 years, but it's something that I'm trying to work on. And if you know what you want to be in 5 years and you're looking at it where you are now and you're nowhere near that person, it's a good practice to look at that gap, right? The person that you are and the person that you want to be, that gap is going to be filled by those small practices that you take every day. If you can envision that person you want to be, and for me, it's like the person that I want to be in a year, right? It's much more of a smaller timeline. And that person that I want to be in a year does very specific things. He works hard. He goes to the gym. He eats healthy. He's in shape. He's present in the moment with relationships and with family, and he's building a successful business, right? And that's really my goal for the next year. There's a line I wrote in my newsletter. It says, "Who you want to be isn't a mystery; it's a mirror," right? And so if you look at the person you want to be in 5 years and think about them as if you're looking at a mirror, right? You can see that person clearly, but they don't exactly look like what you would look like. But you can look at that reflection of the better version of you in the mirror and be like, oh, they do this, 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 and this, right? And you can use that to kind of build a little bit of a game plan on who you want to become and what those small actions every day are what's going to lead you to. I want to talk a little bit about like growth equaling voluntary discomfort, right? Breaking bad habits, healing, becoming stronger, it's literally all uncomfortable. Nothing about that is comfortable. Lifting weights, painful. Eating clean, it's not convenient, and sometimes it's not even tasteful, right? It's uncomfortable. Writing daily, if you're a writer or if you want to, pursue a different trade like that, you'll feel like an imposter at times, right? But growth never comes from ease. That's something that I've learned over the last few years, right? Progress hides inside repetition, inside boredom, inside the work you'd rather skip. Looking back at the last 6 years of my life after leaving college and leaving high school, I can't say I've grown in every area of my life, and that's fine. That's something that I've learned to accept. But I have grown in some areas. I've learned a lot, and I can say that I've become better in areas that I've focused on. But it's all been through small actions that I've taken every day, small steps outside my comfort zone, small tests of, hey, does this fit? And sometimes the answer was no, and I had to pivot, right? And this phrase, memento mori, has stuck in my mind lately. It's the phrase that says, remember that you must die. And I think about this a lot, and this may be a bit of a tangent, where if you were to die tomorrow, right, and I get on a motorcycle and ride to work and ride around, and if you know anything about riding motorcycles, they're very dangerous to a degree, but you can take precautions, but there's always a slight chance, and there's a higher risk than driving a vehicle where something could happen and you could pass away, right? And so in my mind, every time I'm planning to ride the bike into work, it's a 40-minute ride, so it's a long ride, and that increases the likelihood that something could happen. I have to mentally be like, if I were to die tomorrow, would I be okay with that? Is there any things that I've left undone? Are there any relationships that I'm not at a good place with that I want to be at a good place with? Are the people in my life taken care of if I were to check out, And I use this as a reminder to myself that life is short, take action where you can, build consistency, don't regret it, don't regret life. I don't want to get to the end of my life and be like, man, I left something on the table. I should have done this, or I could have done this better. And neither should you, right? So that's the end of the video. I hope that maybe there was something in there that you can take away. I feel like it was a lot of little random things here and there, but I hope it did leave you some value. And as a final call to action, I guess, I do write a weekly, I'm trying to scale it up, but a newsletter where I talk about all these things. And so if you want to read that, if it's not your thing, whatever, that's cool. But yeah, I'll leave it in a link in the bio or link in the description. And we'd love to see you over there. It's a really cool community.